Guess what those guys look like at 1,500 meters? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The only clue you're going to get is when you see that rocket engine kick off and go, hey, what's that? Welcome aboard, everybody. My name is Yousef Badou. We're going to kick off another Left of Bang. This is going to be kind of a special edition. This is a little outside the bailiwick we usually run. Normally, we're talking about situational awareness, behavior analysis, basically the sneakier side of security. But with all the stuff happening in the globe right now, I definitely want to focus on Russia and the military in Ukraine and some of the weapons and capabilities. There's a lot of politics, there's a lot of fear and craziness happening right now. But having spent time in the Marine Corps, having done an invasion, having been through combat deployments, I'm seeing crazy stuff on here, guys. Crazy stuff that I have kind of never seen before. And my whole point to this is just to kind of get on here and talk about some things. So Ukraine, Russia, there's so many ways we can look at this. There's a lot of different talking points we can go down, but this is how I try to kind of control everything in my head. In the Marine Corps, in the military, we have something called, I'm going to date myself a little bit. When I joined, it was called like MET-T, M-E and a T. That was it. And it stood for Mission, Enemy, Time, and Terrain, I think. This was back in 2002 when I came in. Now it's apparently evolved because I Googled it the other day and it's like METT-SLC plus, and it just keeps on going. I just want to focus today's talk around kind of troop leading steps like that. What's the mission? What's the enemy? What's the terrain look like? What's the time look like? And equipment too, especially. So that's how I'm going to attack this. So you can ask me questions about anything you got of what you're seeing out there, but I just want y'all to be aware of some of the asymmetric warfare happening. We've heard that term a lot. We in the military, we throw that term around all the time, asymmetric warfare, okay? It sounds sexy and it sounds cool, but all it means is lopsided. Think of the word symmetry. If my face has symmetry, it means it's equal on both sides. It's the same. But if I'm asymmetric, it means I have a goofy face on one side and a normal face on the other. And that's what this warfare is. For 20 some odd years in Afghanistan and Iraq, where I did my deployments in Iraq, we were fighting a counterinsurgency and we were fighting an asymmetric war. We were the biggest, strongest fighting people on the planet. And we brought all our tanks and MRAPs and F-16s and F-22s. And we spent 20 years duking it out with people in sandals and AK-47s. How does that work? How can something like that go up against the biggest nation? Because of asymmetry. Because if I'm operating as a military and I got vehicles and I got troops and I got civil affairs and I got all these things I have to manage, there are so many ways this could go wrong. So logistically, you have to keep things fueled. You have to keep people fed. Armies, Napoleon said it, our army runs on its stomach. So you have to feed all these people. Oh, by the way, you're getting shot at and blown up the whole time. Where the other side, the insurgency, can take some shots at you, pull out an AK or a machine gun or an RPG, launch it at you, and they can slink back into the population. They only might work in 1 or 2 or 3 man teams. So it's very hard for a standing army to root out insurgency like that. Best military in the world. We were doing it for 20 years, and we're watching that play out in a very new format now. If it was asymmetric before, where we had tanks and all that good stuff, it's really asymmetric now because some of these weapon systems that we're seeing on the battlefield are kind of Looney Tunes, honestly. This is a fluid situation. As I'm sitting here talking to you about this, things are changing on the ground. And some of you might be seeing some of these running around social media. This woman, I don't know what her name is. She has very stout eyebrows, obviously Ukrainian, and she appears to be the patron saint of the Javelin missile system, all right, which is really cool. That's what she's holding in her system. This is the Javelin missile itself. That's a clue system. And that's what the Ukrainians are using on the ground right now with wicked, deadly effectiveness, okay? The Javelin was introduced many years ago. Obviously it was an anti-tank weapon, kind of developed to defeat Soviet tanks back in the day. We haven't really been using it for that reason for 20 years. We've been launching them at mud huts and whatnot. And if you didn't know, these Javelin missiles are about $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 per missile. So it's not a cheap way of going business. So not smart when we were doing it that way. But if you take one of these Javelin missiles, that's $80,000, and you launch it at a T-87, Soviet tank that's a couple $1 million. Okay, now that starts to get asymmetric real quick. And the nature of weaponry, it has gotten so nuts with these, and this is our Ukrainian resistance holding some Javelins, and they also have some British NLAWs in there. The way these things operate, they're fire and forget. Let me tell you a story of how we used to have to do business. If you had this, Soviet tank coming at me, and I had, we were an anti-tank team, right? I was an infantryman. I wasn't an anti-tank guy, but we learned all that stuff. you'd have to get 4 dudes with rockets and you'd do a volley fire on one tank, okay? 4 dudes, 4 rockets, and you all shoot at the same time, try to shoot at the same time. And hopefully, one of those rockets hits and destroys or disables the tank, okay? Odds are probably half those rockets are going to miss. 2 will hit. 1's probably going to bounce off, and the 1 might hit. And guess what? Let's say it impacts and explodes. It might just blow a strut off. It might just blow, the strut off the tank. And now the tank can't go anywhere, but it's still got a huge gun on it that's going to shoot you immediately. Think about it from the perspective of an RPG shooter. RPG only has a max effective distance of about 200-300 yards, depending on the shooter. And oh, by the way, when I shoot my RPG rocket, there's a huge long smoke trail leading right back to me. So God forbid I miss that tank on the first shot, or he has a buddy, and all they do is traverse and blow me off the face of the earth. So it was a sticky situation to take a one person or people against the tank. That's not the case anymore. You can fire one of these rockets almost 1,500 meters away. Do you know what? Like, look at this thing. I know these things look kind of big and bulky and kind of doofy, and you're like, yeah, man, I'd see that coming from a mile away. Guess what those guys look like at 1,500 meters? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The only clue you're going to get is when you see that rocket engine kick off and go, hey, what's that? Probably going to be the last thing going through your head. Talking about the British version of it, we have the Javelin. Of course, Americans, we're like Texans, man. We got to go big. We got to go put all the information, all the tech in there and make these $100,000 rockets that fly up and land directly down on the tank. Well, the British were like, man, we're going to do the same kind of concept. We just don't want to spend as much money as you guys. So they came up with the NLAW, and you see a couple of those there. And that's relatively the same concept, but instead of flying up and landing down, this just flies over the tank and blows up down, and it shoots that charge to disable the tank down. Very effective. Back in the day when you had 4 dudes against, one tank and they had 4 rockets, maybe they might get lucky and disable or take that tank out. Now it's almost a 1-for-1 swap. 1 dude with 1 missile system can take out 1 tank. That's a big change when it comes to warfare. Look at the Russian army. It appears to me that the Russian army showed up in Ukraine today in 2022 with like a 1965 USSR army. They had the latest cutting technology going on then, and they showed up to Ukraine to do this stuff. And it's not working out. I mean, I'm sure you probably see on the news, we can see these direct missile strikes here. And there's reports of these huge Russian convoys moving into areas. The tank convoy, the vehicle convoy might come into the area, and they don't even get a chance to dismount their vehicles before rockets and missiles are hitting them. And it's wiping off the face. You can see these tank columns. They're 8, 9, 10, 15, 20 vehicles. Massive destruction. Okay, war sucks and war is horrible. But coming from a guy who's been to 3 deployments, this is war on a technologically massive scale that we've never seen before. It's wild. Just more pictures of that stuff. So the mission of the Russian, army was to go and invade Ukraine and take it over. I think, this is just my opinion here, I think Putin definitely bit off way more than he could chew. I think he thought it was going to be a Crimea. The Olympics were happening. We didn't really care. No one really cared. They did the same exact thing in Crimea, except no one cared. No one decided to share it on social media. So he thought that was going to happen again. And boy, was he wrong, man. They get into the time and the terrain of the area. That's one of the considerations you got to think about. Hey, when should I be moving my troops in the area? And you'd think Russians, of all people, seeing as World War II happened, would maybe take the time and think about that. But no, they go ahead and decide to attack during what the Ukrainians called the Respunitsa. Okay, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but there's like 2 springs in Ukraine, dry spring and mud spring. Okay, and of all the times of the year you decide to go in, mud spring is decided when we decide to go. Here's a picture of, this is called a Panzer S1 missile system. It's a surface-to-air missile system. Can knock out, our jets, no problem, or, capability too. That's a big radar dish on there. This is like a $15 million piece of equipment. Okay. That's not a cheap price tag. $15 million piece of equipment. And it's relatively new when it comes to the Russian army. And look at this thing. It's, decrepit. They left it. They got it so stuck in mud, they just left it. $15 million vehicle. What's really interesting is the backstory on it. So not only did we attack in Mud Sea, not only are we seeing these convoys just stuck and literally abandoned, full missile systems fully stacked. The guys got up and walked away, but they didn't take into fact